G5A, 9 lines from the top. Rava asked Rav Nachman, Yesh me'ila b'konomos alo. If you use the language of konam, now konam has something, is a key, one of the primary languages of a neder, but really its meaning has to do with a korban. So by saying like something is forbidden to you as if it were a korban, if that's the language of my neder, then what happens if you break the neder? Is that considered, since konam is the language of a korban, is that considered me'ila? Is that considered misusing the property of the sanctuary of hekdesh? So obviously this thing is not really a korban, not really a sacrifice, but by using the language of sacrifice, does that make it subject to the laws of misusing the funds of the sanctuary? Amar Lai, Rav Nachman answers, to Nisua. We have this in the Mishnah. Makom shenotlin ala sachar, in the place where it's customary for, if you return the lost object, that you get paid for your troubles or for any expenses you may have put out. Then what happens to that money if I'm subject to a neder not to benefit from you? So I return you your lost object, right? And I say the bill is $50, but I'm already subject to a neder. You'd made a neder, or I'd made a neder that I can't benefit from you, right? So what happens to that money? I can't accept that money from you. But if you keep it, then what if the neder is two ways? Then if you're not getting benefit from me, then keeping the $50 is like my forgiving a $50 debt to you, right? So this money, can't go to me, can't go to you. So what do we do? Tipahan al hekdesh. Let it go to hekdesh, to the sanctuary, to the treasury. So remember and that's what we saw in our mission also, right? Earlier we saw that if you have nothing to do with this money, both parties are prohibited from using it, then it goes to hekdesh. Now, so remember key hekdesh. So this implies that it has something to do with hekdesh. Like, where did you get this idea it should go to hekdesh? So maybe it's because if you use the word konam to make the neder, then maybe it actually becomes like hekdesh, and that's why it goes to hekdesh. My hekdesh yesh b'nilav konam yesh b'nila, and that would imply that the concept of meila, of misusing temple funds, applies to another, right? Now, the Gemara doesn't actually say, or the Mishnah didn't actually say using the word konam, so it's unclear to me if this means that other languages of neder are also considered korban. That seems unlikely, right? Because our initial inquiry was about the use specifically of the word konam. Anyway, the Gemara says Ketanai. We have a machlokas tanaim about this. Konam kikar, the Brisa says konam kikar is a hekdesh. If you use the term konam about a loaf of bread, and you say this loaf of bread is like hekdesh to everybody, so you're not actually sanctifying it for the temple, but you're saying everyone is forbidden to use it, just like anyone is forbidden to use something that is donated to the treasury of the sanctuary. And then someone eats it. Bein hu bein chavero, whether it's you who made the neder eat it or somebody else, assuming this was your loaf of bread, so you have the right to or swear benefit for anyone from this loaf of bread. So whoever eats from it, moal, then you commit meila. And therefore, you can actually redeem this thing from the neder, right? Just like with something that is sanctified, you can buy it back, you can redeem it with an extra 1/5 payment to the treasury. So too, apparently you should be able to release this loaf of bread from the neder status by buying it out, right? And that presumably the money that you use to buy it back would then be subject to the rules of that same neder. But kikar zu alai lahekdesh. But if you made the neder that this loaf of bread is to me, is like hekdesh to me, right? Then achal, and then someone ate it. Humal, if I ate it, then that's meila. Chavero l'mal, if you eat it, you were never subject to the ban in the first place, so of course you can eat it. Therefore, since it's not universally proscribed, as hektish would be, there's no pidyon. It can't be redeemed. You Rameir, so this is Rameir. Chachamim say no. There's no concept of mila at all when it comes to a neder. Because that's ridiculous, right? It's like, what are you talking about? Because we consider the word konam, which derives from korbanos, but because we consider that a neder word, that doesn't mean that you're making it like a korban, right? I'm sorry, because this korban word, we consider another word. Sure, we consider it a neder, but that doesn't mean that you're actually making it a korban. You want to make something a korban, do it explicitly. So, even if you use the word konam to make something forbidden to you, it is not doesn't have the rules of korbanos. So Ravacha asked, Hikari Alecha, so this we saw similarly before. If a person says, if I say, my loaf of bread is forbidden to you, so I'm saying my loaf, and it's forbidden to you, and the son of Matan, then I give it to you as a gift. Mimal. So if you think that there's Me'ila, so we have to ask the question, does Me'ila apply here as well? Lim'ol no saying. Can we say that the giver of the gift, then I give you this loaf of bread as a gift, I can't be charged with Me'ila because I was never forbidden from it. Hello, asir alei, right? I made this loaf of bread forbidden to you. So by giving it to you, I am not removing it from any hekdesh type status because it's not. I'm not subject to that restriction. It doesn't apply to me. I only forbade it to you. So maybe the receiver, when he receives it, that's like taking it out of hekdesh, and that's mi'ila. But no, yachal di'amar, you could say heter b'isi, asura la b'isi. I was passive, and I agreed to receive this loaf of bread, but I only received it with my understanding that I was allowed. I didn't know that it was like a hektish type thing, that it was forbidden to me. So just receiving it without knowing that it's forbidden, that is not a sufficiently active thing for me to violate, to be considered violating the status of Me'ila. Now recall that with Me'ila, that it more often discusses like the act of removing it. Like what is the threshold? What is the action or the point at which you are removing it from the temple domain, to the point that you are subject to this restriction of Me'ila, or this violation of Me'ila. You have to actually remove it from the temple domain in some way. So just by receiving it and not knowing that it was forbidden, where thinks that's not sufficient. So again, it's like the giver never had any restriction on it, so he can't be moel. He can't be committing Me'ila, and the receiver, if he's unaware, he's only receiving, and he doesn't think that it's a problem, so we can't charge him with Me'ila either. So Rashi asked, the kabel mol kishiyotzi. Okay, so when the receiver violates Me'ila, when he actually does something with it, right? And he picks it up to eat it, then that's an active thing, and that would be considered removing it from the temple treasury. And we know that even if you still think it is permissible, it's not temple property, but you pick it up and take it actively, then it's accidental, but it's still me'ila, right? So similarly here, receiving it from the original owner is not an act of meila, but when you pick it up to eat it, even though you still think it is permissible to you, that is considered meila. Avzemo, this person also commits meila. Clear?
Yeah, I don't understand how it's actually meila if I say it's hektish for you or some other word, because I still can't bring it as a korban until I make it hektish for everyone.
Well, no. So it's not. It can't be brought as a korban. I guess that's true. But
And let's say someone gives me this animal that he says it's hektish for me. I can then give it to someone else, and that person can eat it.
I'm sorry, say I didn't hear you clearly.
If I just give that animal to someone else who's not prohibited for it, that person can just eat it or work it or whatever.
Right.
Because the animal's not really happy.
So you have to distinguish between, there's no one who says that this animal's or this bread or whatever it is has the actual status of a korban. That's not the case. The question is, by using the term which is related to korbanos, do you, in addition to a neder, do you also invoke the power of meila against this, against taking this?
Yeah,
So
it
it's
feels
temple-like, it's
yeah.
as if it were property of the temple, but we're not claiming that the temple actually has any proprietary rights to it, or it can't be actually. It's not actually a korban, right? It's just a question of how do we see it? Do we consider your violation of the neder also a violation of meila, and consequently, is there, if it's forbidden to everybody, there would be the additional thing of pidyon, of being able to redeem it.
Okay, in 4.5 years we'll discuss this again.
All right, let's do. Okay, next Mishnah. A person who is forbidden from benefiting from another's property, he can still have his truman maser taken by that person. So there you would think that benefit, because until I take truma from my produce, I can't eat it, and once truma is separated, I can eat the rest of it. Still, that's not considered enough of a benefit to be violating a neder. And if the subject of the ban is a Kohen, then he can do the sacrifices on behalf of the person who's forbidden to get benefit from him, in the sense of bringing sacrifices for a zav who's recovered, or a woman who gives birth who's recovered. They require korbanos, and the Kohen, even though you can't get benefit from that Kohen, that Kohen can still bring these sacrifices of yours. Remember that most of the rituals performed by the Kohen, not by the person himself. Chatos v'ashamos, the same applies to a Kohen dealing with a korban chatos and a korban asham for you. And we'll see in the Gemara that specifically these kinds of korbanos, but not other ones like the shlamim. And you can teach the other person midrash halachos agados, rabbinic writings. But you can't teach scripture. Now, all of these things are based on and we'll see why in the Gemara there's a difference there. But all these things are based on the idea that mitzvos lav lehenos nitnu. The achieving of a mitzvah is not considered a benefit. Obviously, it's beneficial to you, or you could consider it beneficial to you in a metaphysical way. But in terms of monetary value, we don't consider that benefit to be something tangible. Mitzvos lav lehenos nitnu. The benefit you get from a mitzvah is not considered hana, is not considered benefit. Specifically for our purposes, specifically regarding Nedarim. Right? You can't teach the person himself scripture. but you can teach his sons and daughters scripture. So Gemara will deal with why this is, why there's a specific exception for teaching the person that you can't get benefit from you, why you can't teach him scripture. Interesting, by the way, that the Gemara notes, the Mishnah notes that you teach sons and daughters scripture, right? Whereas other sources seem to indicate that that daughters may not have an obligation. This one indicates that daughters you do have an obligation to teach your daughters Torah. They ask a question. So what is the role of a Kohen performing the avodah or performing the rituals that have sacrifice? Is that Kohen considered your agent or God's agent? Why do we care? Exactly for our case, for determining whether the Kohen can bring your sacrifice if you are not permitted to benefit from that Kohen. If the Kohen is my shaliach, then you're giving me benefit, and that would be prohibited because of the net of Aser. But if you say it's God's agent, then you're not doing me any favors, you're doing God's work. So the netter that I have not to benefit from you is irrelevant. Tashma, let's prove it. Ditznan, we have a Mishnah. Our Mishnah, Makriv of Kine Zavin. The Kohen can do the ritual of the sacrifices of the Zav, and you'll let us the should be done. If you say it's my agent, come on anyway, I'm benefiting. The Gemara says, L'tamech litnei Makriv of Karbanos. Why is the Mishnah specific about these particular Karbanos, right? Where it enumerates these specifically, but not other Karbanos. Ella mechusre kapara shani. What is common about the Zav, the Aledes, and the Chatas and the Asham? These achieve atonement for you, kapara. So perhaps the Amar Rav Yochanan, and Rav Yochanan said about that, Hakol tzrichin das chutz mechusre kapara. Here's another difference about these kinds of karbanos, that they require the owner's knowledge of what's going on. In other words, if you bring if I committed some accidental sin and I'm required to bring a chatas, right? And you go ahead and take one of my cows and sacrifice it as that chatas without my knowledge. Well, that doesn't work according to Rav Yochanan. Rav Yochanan says that does work. Every other type of karban needs my knowledge, but a chatas does not need my knowledge. Shaharei adam maybe karban albana ve'albanosa b'ktani. And how do I know this? Because we know that you can bring sacrifices on behalf of your minor children. Shenamar, and look the proof text for that. Zos Torah Sazav, an extra kind of introductory or sum up phrase. This is the Torah of the Zav, the laws of the Zav. Ben Gadol Ben Katan. What does that come to include? That a Zav who is a minor still has the responsibility to bring a Karbanos to recover from the Zav status, right? Well, obviously, the minor doesn't have any ownership rights, doesn't have any property, may not even have any, may not even be considered competent to do any of these things, and yet you can bring on their behalf. Okay, so it seems like a person can bring a kapara achieving sacrifice on behalf of someone else, even without their knowledge, without their consent. And so we could extend that, and we could extend that to the idea that that there is a benefit conferred on that there's no benefit conferred on the person by bringing this karban, and so that's how so that would explain why the Mishnah specifically mentioned these types of karbanos as those that you can benefit from the Kohen bringing them on your behalf. But other karbanos, it would not be the case, right? So therefore we cannot prove from our Mishnah that in general the Kohen acts on your behalf because it's specifically referring to these specific types of karbanos. Where it says El Miyatzal Rabbi Yochanan, but wait, if that's the case, Zos Torah Seiledes. If you're going to take this sum up statement, Zos Torah Zav, this is the law of the Zav, to include minors, well, you'd have to do the same for a similar statement. Zos Torah Seiledes. This is the law of a woman giving birth, where the Torah prescribes the sacrifices that she has to bring. It uses the same term. This is the law of the woman who gives birth. So could you say ben katana ben gadola? Could you say that it means whether minor or not? Katana bas leilahi, that wouldn't be relevant because a minor child is not it's not relevant to her. She can't give birth. And how do I know that? V'hatani Rav Bibi Kamid Rav Nachman, because Rav Bibi taught Shalosh Nashim Shamsons B'moch. There's three types of women who can use this contraceptive method. Katana Umu Beres Umenika, a minor, a pregnant woman, and a nursing woman. These are all people who are believed to be incapable of becoming pregnant. Okay, if you're already pregnant, or you're nursing, or you're a minor, it appears that the common factor is that the Gemara believes that they cannot become pregnant. So to be consistent, this Zos Torah Seileda, the phrase Zos Torah something, this is the law of something, cannot refer to minors. So Rabbi Yochanan's proof text falls apart. And continuing to Katana Shanati Savar V'Tamus. So the Gemara qualifies as I've been stating it not quite right. Not that a minor cannot become pregnant, but that she cannot withstand the birth, right? So in other words, there could not be a case of a minor giving birth and bringing the sacrifice because she wouldn't survive the birth. So the Gemara answers, no, the idea of the verse, this is the law of such and such, it does come to exclude something. In the case of the Zav, it can come to exclude minors. In the case of the Yoledes, of the woman giving birth, it excludes Ben Pikachas Ben Shota. It excludes women who are not in their right minds. Okay, so you have a person who's not competent, and she gives birth. Well, that's certainly possible. But can she be required to bring a sacrifice, or to have the sacrifice brought on her behalf to recover from her childbirth status of Tuma? So then the answer would be yes, that it's included. She's included, even though she cannot be required to do something, right? Because she is not subject to any laws if she's not competent, not mentally competent. And nonetheless, somebody else can bring it on her behalf. So then we can still stick with the idea of Zos Torah. So this is the law of being something that includes people who would otherwise be not included. For example, in the case of Zav, like a minor. And how do I know this? Shekin Adam maybe Karban Alishto Shota, because Kedibur Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was that if you have that a husband can bring the sacrifice, the post-birth sacrifice, on behalf of his wife, even if she's not mentally competent. Tanya, we have this in the Bryce. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Adam maybe Karban Ashir Al Ishto V'chol Karbanos Shechayavas. A man can bring a woman's sacrifice, like the sacrifice of a wealthy person in the case of a sliding scale karban, or any karban, any sacrifice that she's obligated to bring, such as Yoledes, excuse me. Shekach Kosev Labi. Why? What's the source of this ability? Because this is what he writes in her ksuba. V'achrayus de'islich alai. Any obligation that you have on me min kadmasuna from today on. That's written in the ksuba, and so that is the source of his responsibility and ability to bring the carbon on her behalf. So too the someone else can bring a carbon on the behalf of the minor who is a zav. And that brings us back to the idea that our Mishnah is talking about specifically sacrifices which are mechusrei kapara, but generally sacrifices, other kinds of sacrifices, that would be considered a benefit when the Kohen does the avodah for you. And so that would indicate, to answer the question that the Gemara started with, that the Kohen is your shliach, your agent, and not God's shliach. And if you forswear hana from him, then he can't do these other korbanos for you. And that's the okay. So that's where we will end up today. The Gemara will continue to discuss this and the other aspects of the Mishnah in the coming pages. Have a good day, everybody.